As I prepared this meditation, I remembered a video I saw posted on YouTube of Steve Krashen speaking a number of years ago on the subject of comprehensible input. And at the end of this particular talk, he makes the statement about how we acquire language when we understand messages. It's so true. Not only when it comes to second language acquisition, but with so many other things as well. Indeed, communication is about more than just what you say as a teacher. It is also about what your audience understands. Wisdom. In the book of Ecclesiastes, the original Hebrew term for wisdom is chokmah. It is defined as skill in living, or the ability to discern properly as to what's true or right. Other comparable terms for wisdom include binah, also from the Hebrew, which translates to understanding. And then there's also phronesis, from the Greek of the New Testament. This definition has to do with mental action or activity. That is to say, intellectual or moral insight or prudence. Considering all of these terms, we thus have a bit fuller of a picture as to exactly what wisdom is. True wisdom looks at life around it, objectively evaluates what it experiences, figures out the most appropriate course of action to take, and so according to what is realistically understood about the situation and circumstances pertinent. In chapter 1 of James, we read of how it is something God has to give generously, without finding fault, to all who ask him for it. Wisdom is commonly found through experiences we may go through in everyday life, endeavoring to apply theory to practice. It comes also through observing what others go through, for better or for worse. In chapter 1 of Proverbs, verses 20 and 21, we read of how wisdom shouts in the street. She lifts her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the gates to the city, she utters her sayings. Just as these verses say, wisdom is always right where you find it, when you look for it, and if you look for it. I want to look at some principles from the end of Ecclesiastes and how they relate to wisdom and teaching. In the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes is of a genre known as wisdom literature. In English, the word Ecclesiastes itself is originally from the Greek. Its meaning is a person who speaks before an assembled group of people, or a crowd. In Hebrew, the original term for the book is kohelet, that is to say, the preacher or the teacher. In Ecclesiastes, the teacher is Solomon, the son of David, who succeeded him as king over the nation of Israel. By many, in his time, Solomon was considered to be the wisest man around. Written in his later years, Ecclesiastes is about his take on life as he had observed it under the sun. This is to say, apart from God, searching for meaning, fulfillment, satisfaction, and even so in view of absurdities and other inconsistencies, even as they are taught nonetheless as according to the way things are supposed to be. His conclusion on life under the sun was that it's all futile, perplexing, and meaningless. His purpose was to show how to live wisely in light of this reality. That is to say, looking to and living for God in Christ. In verses 9 and 10 of Ecclesiastes chapter 12, we read of how not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched so to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. As I studied this, I found a couple of pearls of wisdom worth thinking about as we go about our modus operandi as teachers. Not only was the teacher wise, Solomon was wise. He had gotten out and experienced the world and everyday life around him. Of everything in life there is to try out, for better, for worse, he tried it all out. He evaluated what he experienced. He figured out what works best. He then imparted the wisdom he had acquired to the people. He came back and taught them everything he knew. As educators in world languages, our purpose is about more than just guiding others in developing the ability to communicate in a second language. Many of us have invested a significant chunk of our years in not only study and book learning, but we've also invested it in getting out and experiencing beyond life as we know it in our own respective circles and communities. We've spent time in other countries and cultures. And just in case you haven't yet had the opportunity, I say go for it. It's worth your time. As we've done so, we've studied and reflected on details of the cultures and places where our languages are spoken. As we've studied and reflected, we've had the chance to savor not only what's different, for instance, Diego Rivera, Paella, and Milongas. But as we've studied and reflected, we've also had the chance to discover what realities tend to be the same all around. For instance, basic human nature. In our own respective life journeys, how have we also acquired something to say in terms of wisdom and perspective? In what ways have you so acquired? We mustn't squander it. How might you use it to build into the lives of others coming behind you in ways that are compelling? As Solomon the preacher taught, he pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words. He sought to find just the right words to express truths clearly. As we teach our learners, part of the responsibility lies in figuring out exactly how and where what we know fits in and how it applies in what we are trying to say. Also remember to always find just the right words to express what you teach clearly. There is definitely a place for coloring the picture, using examples that are meaningful to your learners in their world. Some of the best teachers that I've ever had did exactly this, and what they had to say came alive and inspired me. A favorite analogy of mine is how the sum total of what we learn can more or less be compared to being entrusted with a large block of salt. What happens when you apply too much salt to something? It dries up and dies. However, the right amount of salt sprinkled on in just the right place, at just the right time, it enhances the flavor and makes it more palatable. And this is also true in how you sprinkle a little bit of wisdom from life experience into what you're teaching or modeling for your learners. In just the right way, in just the right place, at just the right time, wisdom enhances the flavor of it and makes it more meaningful. What are the best terms in which to put it that help it make a more vivid sense to specifically your learners? Do make that time to always ponder and search out that wisdom according to your experience. And do consider what you pick up more formally at conferences and workshops you attend, and more informally as you interact with your colleagues. Consider also what you may hear of anywhere elsewhere. And take the time to reflect on experiences you've had in life. Consider the times when things have gone well, successfully, and consider the reasons why. Consider also instances in which things didn't quite go that way, even where there was failure that came even at a cost that was significant to you. Again, consider why. In either case, what was the lesson that you learned as a result? What did you do with it henceforth? What will you do with it henceforth? All of us to determine exactly how it might fit into your classroom. And what he wrote was upright and true. Beyond functional language proficiency, in what other ways might you set a more outstanding example to your learners that they may be impacted in ways that just might shape who they will be for the better? On questions that call for wisely standing your moral ground as a response, do not ever be afraid to do exactly that. Do not be afraid to share your reasons behind why. Do we really owe them anything less? Remember, communication is about more than just what you have to say as a teacher. It is also very much about what your audience understands. That is to say, your learners. How is it meaningful to them where they are at? Pondering, searching out, drawing from wisdom you have acquired earlier on in your own journey, just like King Solomon. All of it is legal tender in the interest of the clearest possible understanding of what we endeavor to share with those with whom we are charged in preparing for tomorrow. In our respective spheres of influence, let's consider the wisdom we have looked at here as it was meaningful to Solomon, as it's meaningful to us in our own experience, in life and also in teaching. How exactly might it be meaningful in ways compelling to your learners throughout your sphere of influence for understanding the message, for acquiring